I'm here.
You're here. Okay, I think we're about ready to get started. I think most of you know me. I'm Carolyn Sheets, Chair of Voter Services and Vice President. Normally Alice would be running this meeting, but the transformer outside of her house got blown up this morning, so she has no electric. So I'd like to welcome Mike Bennett. He is the Supervisor of Elections for Manatee County, has been for several years. I know several of you went with us. We did a field trip over there, and he showed us what he could show us about the election security. And I was particularly impressed with how they handled the vote by mail. I mean, it's so safe. But one of the things I found out, we have all been talking about promoting vote by mail. I posted it on my Nextdoor account. It had over 100 entrants to the storyline. It's the biggest I've ever seen. A lot of them, though, had very unusual misconceptions. I would say urban myths even. So it went back and forth. So we have Mike here who's going to try to assure us, and I have some of these people who are not too sure about what's going on with our election system, which is liable to be changed because of the COVID-19 and more vote by mail and voting and all that. So I would like to start with a couple of questions that we have come up with that I'm thinking that Mike will probably be addressing. When he finishes talking, I will allow you to come on and ask questions, but I would ask you to raise your hand and I will call you and let you talk so you don't get too much close. One of the things that bothered me, being that I am League of Women Voters and we are totally nonpartisan, people were responding to this as a political issue. And I was wondering why it has come to be a political issue. Another point is the early voting and vote by mail because of COVID-19. Are special arrangements being made for our election, early voting, vote by mail to handle what looks to be like an overload of vote by mail at this point? Have you received more money from the state, and how will that be put to use? How do you reach out to those people who are eligible but are not registered yet? Since we're not going out and gathering all these people to get them registered, I'm concerned about so many, especially our point is the young people. Another thing that we have heard about recently is the ERIC program. And we wondered how you were using that and if it has made any changes in our election system, our registration, all of that. Another one, which I know the answer to that, does Manatee County ever check the paper ballots against the machine tally to make sure the machines are operating correctly? And then finally, provisional ballots. What are they? How are they used? What happens if someone does fill one out? Okay, I would like to turn it over to Mike Bennett now. We'll sit back and listen to him.
Well, let's try this. That was a pretty long series of questions you want to talk about. So if I skip
I think what you're talking about is going to cover them.
Right. And if we skip over something, come back to it and we'll answer the question.
Yeah.
But we got to just about go back to the PPP, the Presidential Preference Primary. That's when the COVID-19 first hit us. And we lost close to 20% of our poll workers. And when that happened, we had to start combining real quickly the polling places so we would have all the polls operating on election day. And we are still facing a large loss of poll workers who are saying, most of our poll workers truly are retired and they're of that same age that I am, that how much do I want to be out in public? And so I understand it. As soon as that happened, we started on a program in Manatee County to actively and aggressively go after vote by mail. And what we've done on vote by mail is we are literally all over Facebook. We're on YouTube. We are using social media, and it worked out quite well. We have gone from the last presidential preference primary, where we had like 30,000 went out. We are expecting right now to be mailing out close to 90,000. Okay. We've been very, very aggressive recruiting people for vote by mail. In addition to the social media, anytime somebody calls the office, we're soliciting their permission, if you will, is to include them by vote by mail, because the client has to ask, not just include them. In addition to that, for those of you who live in Manatee County who were not signed up for vote by mail, you should have received in your utility bill. We are mailing all the utility customers from Manatee County to sign them up for vote by mail. So we've got to be aggressive on this. We are signing up a little over about 125 to 150 people per day who are signing up to vote by mail. So it's working pretty good. What we're trying to get people to understand is the best insurance that they can get, that they will be able to vote on election day. They do not have to use that ballot. They can fill that ballot out at home, come to the polls, drop it in the box, go to the early voting site, drop it in the box. Or if they want to on election day because their health is right, their job didn't call them in late, their boss didn't say they had to work late, they can actually bring that ballot down to the office, to the precinct, turn it in, fill out another ballot. And when that happens though, so people will understand, if they do not surrender the vote by mail ballot that we sent them, okay, they will have to vote a provisional ballot at the polls until we can find and assure that they only voted one time. Yes, we do have some people who insist that they did not vote by mail. And when they come down there, we show them their signature, we show them their envelope, and they just simply forgot because they had done it 3 or 4 weeks before. So the provisional ballot is an insurance policy. It's another insurance policy. When we mail out that vote by mail ballot, if they don't want to vote it, they can turn it in. They can bring it down, vote it in the provisional box, or excuse me, the vote by boxes that we will have at all of the early voting sites. So it's an insurance policy, and that's how they should look at it, that they're going to be able to vote regardless on election day. And that's really what we're striving for on that. The early voting sites can accept those ballots. Now, I got to be honest with you. I'm a little bit older than a lot of people, okay? And I'm a military vet. And even as a supervisor of elections, I always get a vote by mail ballot at home, but I do not give it to my secretary. I got to put it in the box, okay? Don't ask me why, but it's like I want to put it in the box, and it's just a personal preference of mine. And I know that my staff's going to go out of the box and count it, but there's just something, to me, a patriotic thing for Mike Bennett that says, I want to put it in the box. And so I understand that. And so we have a lot of people drop them off at the early voting sites. We are asking the state to give us permission to add more early voting sites. We are asking the state for permission to keep the early voting sites open all the way through the Tuesday evening election. What we're concerned about is if we have that lack of poll workers, and we expect that lack of poll workers, we will be combining some of our precincts again, and we would like to be able to keep the early voting sites open all the way up and use them for the election on Tuesday. Okay, so that's what we're planning on doing with the early voting. We are looking actively for at least 2 more early voting sites in Manatee County. When I was first elected, we had 1. We now have 5. I would like to take that to 7. And that has really cut down on the lines. Those of you know, voted those last time. For all intents and purposes, we did not have any lines. You always have a line at 7 o'clock in the morning. I mean, you always do, because people are going to do it on their way home from work. You're going to work, and then you're going to have people on their way home from work. So you're always going to have a short line there. But the early voting has really helped, and the huge increase of vote by mail that we've had. Right now, we expect a shade over 30% of the voters in Manatee County will vote by mail. Then when you go out and when you talk to people about vote by mail, they relate some of the press that has happened out of, say, Miami-Dade. We are not Miami-Dade. In the years that I have been there, you know, we have really had no issues. We've had extremely few complaints about vote by mail. It is secure, it is safe, it is truly a great way to vote. Some people also say that, you know, you're going to end up with a whole bunch of ballots that the post office is going to not deliver for one reason or another. People are going to throw away all the Republican ballots, or they're going to throw away all the Democrat ballots. It really doesn't happen. It's a myth. It's a shame that it's out there. I hate to see people talk about negative. The same people who talk about negative on vote by mail are the same ones who get mailed their Social Security check, get mailed their taxes, get, you know, mailed their credit card bill. So there's really a myth about that. But vote by mail seems to be working really, really great in Manatee County, and it should not be a political issue. It should be a patriotic issue of exercising your opportunity and right to vote in our country. That's vote by mail. As far as the security of vote by mail, the way that we do it, and some of you have heard it, when those ballots come in, the very first thing that happens is staff scans that ballot, the envelope. That envelope tells us who they are, were they in the right precinct, were they a registered voter. That goes one direction. The ones who we have an issue with, we immediately notify. We can't verify your signature, your address is wrong, something else is wrong with it. We immediately notify them and ask them to send in certification that it was them that voted, that it was their signature. And so we correct those as fast as we can. Those ballots that are approved and ready to be counted then go to the opening room. The first person does nothing but slice the envelope open. They do not open the envelope. They don't take the material out of the envelope. They slice the envelope. Then it goes to the table where there are always 2 political parties represented. It could be a Democrat and an independent, a Republican and a Tea Party. It doesn't matter. There's got to be 2 different people there. They separate that envelope. They pull it out. The envelope goes one direction, the ballot goes the other way. They will never, ever see each other again. You would not be able to find mine, okay? It is gone. At the end of the day, they count the envelopes, they count the ballots, make sure everything matches up there. We then run those ballots through this high-speed tabulator. On election night at 7 o'clock, we actually publish those numbers from early voting and the vote by mail. So when you see the statistics jump up right away, those are not the statistics from the precincts. Those have not reached us yet. Those don't normally get there until they start arriving around 7:15. But the first ones you see are the early voting and the vote by mail. So those are the first ones that count. Some people say, well, they don't count the vote by mail. Absolutely wrong. Those are the very first ones we count. So those are in, and then it's all done. The provisional ballots, people who did not surrender their vote by mail ballot, or they voted in the wrong precinct, or they didn't have an ID when they got there to vote, they vote provisional. Every one of those is counted, but they're surveyed by the canvassing board. Canvassing board is made up of myself, the chief judge of the county or their appointee, the chairman of the county commission or their appointee. They review them all. we have to make sure that one vote for one individual stays clean in Manatee County. That's what we do. But all of those provisional ballots normally are counted. The election's on Tuesday, normally by Friday, they're counted. So when you hear the statistics on election night, these are the quote unofficial results, because we have not finished tabulating the overseas ballots. The military have an extra 10 days to come in. We have provisional ballots to look at. And after that, that the final certified results are turned in. That's when it actually happens. Okay, so I'll take any questions you've got now on vote by mail, and then we can move on to other subjects.
Excuse me, I have a question. This is Joanne Clement. Hi, Mike.
Hello, Joanne. How are you? It's been a while.
I'm great. I live in an over 55 community, and I would like to be able to pick up some vote by mail ballots to bring to the people here. Are we allowed to do that?
No.
No.
Okay. One of the problems that we have is there have been cases of people gathering vote by mail, okay? And that's a danger. If you get into some areas where people for nefarious reasons want to check those out, there have been many, many, many cases of people saying, look, I'm going to give you $10 to vote my way. Bring me your ballot, have it filled out, turn it in to us. We will fill it out for you, okay? And we will give you your $10 or your whatever they do. So we do not allow that collection, okay? You can do it with family members up to 3, total of 3 at the amount. So we have to be very careful of that.
Okay, I understand now that you explain it. I get it. So the best thing for me to do is encourage them to come down to the office and pick up the ballot themselves, and then they return it themselves.
Well, if they just call, all they have to do is call the office.
Okay.
Request vote by mail. It'll be mailed out to us.
Okay.
We make it extremely easy. They can do it online. They do not have to come down. Just call the office, or they can go online and sign up for vote by mail.
And then when they're finished filling it out, they pop it in the mailbox, right?
Drop it in the mailbox.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
I would encourage them. I would encourage them to drop it early. Okay, this is not like a presidential preference primary where you're going to have people bailing out at the last end, and you're going to say, "Well, Mike Bennett voted for Jeb Bush, but Jeb Bush bailed out the day after I filled out my ballot." Okay, in the primary election is coming up, the general election in November. Candidates who are on there will be certified. They will be the candidates, and their vote will count. So by mailing it in early, you're taking away the thought that the post office might not get it to us in time. We don't like to send out a ballot other than personally hand it to somebody. We don't mail them out. Pretty much, we start encouraging people to come down if we're within a week of the election. Because by the time you mail it out, if it takes a couple days to get there, a couple days to get back, there's a chance that they could miss. So you'll know, and this is interesting. I know it sounds crazy, but even last week, we are still getting ballots in, okay, that people, for some reason or another, didn't send in because the post office, the mark on them is like last week, so it's not like they were lost in the mail. 2 weeks ago, we actually got one mailed in, and the envelope was from the 2016 election, okay? So things like that happen, okay, but it's very rarely. So we encourage people to look at it, and I think a lot of you ladies have heard me say before, the vote by mail ballot, we get a better educated voter. And I'm not talking about high school education, college education. I'm talking about people who've sat around and educated themselves and discussed it with their family and friends of who's on the ballot and what's on the ballot and who are they going to vote for. They educate their children as their children are sitting around the house and are listening to mom and dad talk about these candidates and why it's so important to vote. All of a sudden, you've got the youth interested in what's going on with the election process. I think that's so important. So when I say an educated voter, I'm talking about a voter who truly has understood the issues, researched the candidates, know what they're looking for on the deal, and talking to their friends and neighbors and family.
Okay, this is Carolyn. I have a couple of chat questions that have come over.
Okay.
The first one asked, I believe it means to everyone, do you have the authority to send out countywide mail-in ballots? I believe that's to everyone. And if so, how much additional funding would it require?
No, we don't, because according to Florida statute, unless somebody specifically requests a vote by mail ballot, we do not send them out. You know, that has come up lately too. Why doesn't the state of Florida the governor come down and say, hey, we're going to do this election by vote by mail and we're just going to mail everybody a ballot? California is looking at doing that. There are 5 states that pretty much do all vote by mail. You still have to request the ballot, but they do it all. The problem that you have right now is if that happened, it would fall apart. And the reason it would fall apart is the vendors, the people who actually print the envelopes and print the ballots. They cannot get the supplies. The vendors would not be able to meet the demand. We've talked to the vendors. The vendors are saying there's just absolutely no way that they can secure the stock that we use for the ballots is special, okay, to go through those high-speed scanners. The envelopes are special. The inventory is truly not there. I do believe that there may be a movement by the year 2022, possibly, that you could see a movement toward it all vote by mail in Florida. I don't think it's going to happen, but at least the vendors would have time to secure the inventory that they need to print them and get them out.
Going along with that, someone asked if you do the return postage.
We do not do return postage to Manatee County. And I know that this upsets a lot of people, but if somebody's not willing to spend 45 cents to exercise the greatest right in the world, okay, they can drop it off, they can bring it down, but I do not pay for the postage. You say, well, why should 60% of Manatee County pay for the postage for the other 30%? I get it, I understand it, I do not do it. Again, I'm pretty tight with the budget down in Manatee County. Now, if the state of Florida, as some of you know, we have requested some help from the feds. If the feds send us down the entire $20-some million that the state of Florida has asked, there may be money left in there that it might alleviate some of that. But on the Manatee County budget, we do not include it.
Okay, we've got several here on the chat. This one, with so many negatives on Facebook and social media about vote by mail, why do you think that is? Do you think it's just to disenfranchise minorities and Democrats?
No, I don't think it's trying to disenfranchise necessarily as much as it's ignorance. That they, you know, like I say, those are the same people who will trust to mail in their check and get their checks from wherever they're getting them from. But for some reason or other, think that this is a nefarious power grab, political, and it's really a shame. For those people, if they actually understood and would do their research, if they're concerned about the Democrats, and I've heard that point made that the Democrats are going to stack the election by using vote by mail. Our statistics have shown if I mail out 30,000 vote by mail ballots to Republicans and 30,000 vote by mail ballots to Democrats, the Republicans will outperform the Democrats and send in more ballots.
Yeah, I see Alice has her hand up.
Oh, well, I put it in chat too. But basically, could you explain to everyone, Florida joined this ERIC system that is combining a series of databases to spot people who have moved or have died, to keep the things clean. And you can also, the registration's clean, but you can also use it for people that have come in. Can you explain how Manatee County is using it, and maybe explain a little better how the ERIC system works? I know there's 30 states and DC are now a part of the system.
Well, when I was in the legislature, is when I first heard of ERIC, and I was fighting then to get it passed. And I really felt that ERIC was something that would really help us, would also help smooth out some of the people's concerns about being registered in Ohio and also in Florida and voting for president twice. That does happen, and it did happen. So I was pushing hard for that to happen. Though I got the bill passed to do ERIC, I did not get the bill passed to fund ERIC. Okay? The supervisors' elections in Florida as an organization really pushed hard with the Florida legislature to fund the ERIC program. So we are now fully funded, and we're part of the 30, I think there's 32 now, states that are part of it. What happens, and I would challenge all of the people who are sitting here listening, most of us moved from another state. And I'm saying that most of you who are listening right now did not go into the state that you left, Ohio, Michigan, New York, whatever it was, and say, hey, I'm moving to Florida, take my name off the list. You probably didn't do it. So you were probably registered to vote in 2 states, okay? And it wasn't you planned on doing something nefarious or crooked or anything like that. It's just something we don't think about, okay? So consequently, we had a lot of people, I'm talking about in the millions of people who were registered in multiple places. ERIC is set up to try to clean that voter roll up. ERIC is set up to make it as easy as possible for us to register people to register to vote and to verify that they are not registered also in Ohio, so or Iowa or New York. So what happens is when they fill out and we turn it in to the state to get them included in the voter roll, that immediately goes into the ERIC system. ERIC scans the rest of the participating states and says, okay, Mike Bennett is not registered anywhere else. Let's register Mike Bennett here in Florida. And now I'm upset and I'm set up to vote. So that's what the whole purpose of ERIC is to try to clean up the voter rolls across the country and take out some of the confusion when people relocate and move around. So ERIC has just been a wonderful, wonderful deal. We've really not had the full experience of using ERIC that we will in this upcoming election. But I'm really excited about it. It was a personal thing on my end, something that I wanted to fight for to make it easy for people to register to vote and to vote. And hopefully we can get all 50 states to eventually participate in this process. And I think we will. ERIC has been very, very generous with trying to fund it or getting the funding, and they're doing it by population. So those little smaller states that don't have the population don't pay as much as say Florida does to participate.
Okay, we have a question from Ted and then Ann.
I'd like Mr. Bennett to talk about the online tracking of the vote by mail ballots. I was a little confused by that. I did it the first time back in March, and I'd just like to know, like, as you advance through like the steps on the online tracking, like what exactly is like, what's the process that my ballot is going through? I was also a little confused because my understanding was that the vote by mail ballots were counted or put through the machine or whatever first, but it seemed that it didn't show that my ballot was processed until like late on election day. So I'd just like to clarify that. I appreciate that.
Sure. Basically what happens is when that comes in, they scan it. That's the first time it shows it's arrived. Okay. That's all it shows. We got it. Okay. When they go back to the process to be open, that could possibly take 2 or 3 weeks, okay? Because we're not going to start opening ballots until we have the first canvassing board meeting. The canvassing board has to come in for its first meeting, and then we authorize the staff to start opening. A ballot cannot be opened unless I am physically in the office, okay? We are very, very careful of that. If for some reason others say I ended up in the hospital, one of the other members of the canvassing board must be in the office. And I'm not talking about in the parking lot, I'm talking about in the office when those ballots are touched and opened. We want to make sure that there's never any question. So consequently, we might receive your ballot, say on a Monday, but they don't start the opening process for another 8 or 10 days, okay? Then when they process it, they will show that it's been tabulated when it goes through the batch of envelope or the votes that was put into that batch. We stack them into numbers of 200 so we can keep track that, hey, there were 200 ballots received. I processed 200 ballots, and I personally, Mike Bennett, physically processes all 60,000. I stand there and feed them. We're very, very careful on the security. We don't want any questions. We invite people to come down. We've obviously had representatives of the league. We've had representatives of the Republican Party, Democrat Party to come down and watch the process to see how careful we are with that. There's enough concern about vote by mail that we take it maybe beyond what it has to be. But all I know is at the end of the day, I can look Ted in the eye and say, Ted, we got your ballot, we processed your ballot, and now it's posted online that we did it. Now you got to remember on that last day of mailing, okay, that we actually get mailed at 7 o'clock on Tuesday evening, okay, it's going to take us those a couple days to show up. And we've had people complain, well, I dropped it off and I didn't, it didn't show up.
Yeah.
Well, unfortunately, I got to have time to process them. So that's really what happens.
Okay, thank you.
And
And
I'm up now?
yes,
Okay. My question is on the ballot and surrendering. If we have filled out our mail-in ballot, well, all right, say we don't fill it out and we go to a voting site. We can surrender the blank ballot and then our vote is not provisional. And also, can we drop it at the SOE office? But if you, right,
You can
does
bring
your
it
ballot
down,
become provisional?
right, you can bring it down to the SOE's office up until 7 o'clock on the night of the election, okay? Stick it in the box, it's done, there's no provisional, there's nothing else. If you go to the polling place, the early voting site, right now the early voting sites shut down Saturday night, okay? But up until that time, we have a box out there that they can put it in, and it's not provisional. On election day, if they bring it down, okay, they have to surrender that one and vote another one, and it's done. Cannot, right now, we're asking for permission to do it the other way, but right now, the state of Florida does not allow you to turn that provisional or that vote by mail ballot in on election day at the precinct. We're asking for that to change, that it would be able to be all the way up until the night of the election on the early voting site.
So if you bring your blank, can you vote in person and then it counts?
Right.
Yeah.
And you just hand your blank in and then they do
Right.
whatever they
But
do.
if you don't turn your blank one in, okay, then you have to vote provisional because we have to verify that it didn't crisscross and that there were 2 votes under Ted's name. And since Ted looks a little beady to me, I'm going to say Ted probably would have
This, and this will not be at every early voting site that we can do that.
yeah,
It'll be at every early voting site,
sure.
and hopefully we'll be able to add 2 more, and hopefully we'll be able to keep them open through election night. Right now, I have to tell you that we are going to shut that early voting site down at 7 o'clock on that Saturday.
Okay. Elaine, was your question answered in the other process?
No. Can you hear me?
Yes,
I can do it.
you're good.
Okay. My question was, could you do an op-ed or some piece outlining what happens to my ballot once I mail it, or even from the time it's sent, that we could disseminate to people and use on social media, but something that shows people and explains to people the process that you've just gone through explaining to us?
You know, we've tried to do that before. You know, newspapers like to charge by the column inch. And so consequently, by the time we send them in a written process, if you will, they're not overly nuts about printing it because it is quite intensive. But we will be sending out more mail or editorials. Heck, I'm running for election, so I like having my name out there, okay? But on the same token, you have to understand that they're in the business to sell column inches. We don't pay for that. If we can get them to do it as a courtesy, and oftentimes they have, and we will continue to do it, and we kind of have a script right now that we're trying to get them to publish, that we're working on right now.
All right, any other questions? No other questions? Everybody's
Yeah,
happy?
how soon can we drop off our mail-in ballot at the SOE office?
As soon as you get it.
The day you get it,
Really? Even before early voting is open?
yes. When you get that ballot, we start mailing out 45 days in advance because we've got to get to the military and the overseas people. Yours as a local would go out in 30 days in advance. So in that period of time, anytime that you've got it, fill it out, bring it down, put it in the box, and you're covered.
And one last question for me. Provisional ballots, do you get an awful lot of them?
You know, we got a lot this time in the PPP because I think there was a lot of confusion. I think there were a lot of people who were, I don't know, maybe waiting for the last minute because, you know, if you go back to the previous presidential preference primary, where so many of the candidates dropped at the last minute, and then all of a sudden you had the Democrat primary, presidential preference primary this time, where so many of those candidates dropped at the last minute. People were not sure who they were voting for, or were they even going to be in the game. As much as I like people to vote those ballots as soon as they can so we can process them, since it happened to me personally, that when I voted for it dropped out, okay, I can understand why people didn't want to. Now, why we had so many of the provisionals this time, I really can't put my finger on it, other than when the vote by mail increases drastically, more and more people, signatures don't match. And the reason the signatures don't match is because they register to vote at the DMV. They go over to get their driver's license, they sign that electronic pad.
Okay.
That electronic pad does not look like your signature that you put on a piece of paper. So we spend an inordinate amount of time going through and looking at those and trying to find something in that signature that I can say, hey, you know, this is Jenny's signature. This is Chris's signature, okay? So we're looking for something. But if we can't do anything else, then we send out the notice that your signature did not match up. Please fill out the form, the affidavit, give us a copy of your driver's license, send it back. Those have to be turned into provisionals and have to be reviewed by the canvassing board. So the canvassing board had an inordinate amount in the presidential preference, and I would expect we will be doing that in the upcoming, due to the fact that so many people are registering to vote and not signing a hard copy. I would like to see the state of Florida rule change that when you register to vote at the DMV, you sign a hard copy. That's what will
Yeah,
match your
like-
signature.
Do you get thousands of provisionals? Or?
No, hundreds.
Thank you.
Okay, a couple others. I have a couple chat questions here. How many mail-in ballots have you ultimately rejected, and what are the most common errors?
We rejected a total, actually I had that number, we were looking at it earlier. We rejected a total, if I can figure it out here, it was 701, okay? We sent out 780 affidavits of having people to sign, and it's really a shame because we go through the time and effort to send out backup paperwork, and the number of people who just ignore it and say, "Ah, to hell with it, I'm not going to vote," and it's really a shame. But and most of those, you know, some of these, and we didn't reject them for these, but Alice and her husband are sitting in the room, and they both have vote by mail ballots. And when they put them in the envelope, Alice signs her husband, and he signs hers. Okay. So when it comes in, the first moment they scan it, all of a sudden, wait a minute, that's not Alice's signature. Okay. So we try to wait for any others that were sent to that address. If in fact there was other ones sent to that address, we go ahead and count them because we realized it was strictly a Scribner's type error and they just swapped envelopes. So you don't have many of those. When we sent out the cure affidavit of all of those, 345 people responded and filled out the information and sent it back to us. Most of those were because of signatures. We had cases in the cross match, 109 of them, that it was obviously it was not her signature. Sometimes we'll have a problem where a college student, daddy signed their envelope at home, mama signed their envelope at home, and those jump out at us, and if we can't correct them in time, obviously we can't take them. So there's a variety of reasons. Signature missing completely. There's nothing we can do. You would be shocked at the number of empty envelopes we get. And I think some people want to credit voting on their voting record, but just don't want to take the time to actually vote the ticket. So you get those. We had 80 who had no signature on them at all. We had 60 signed by somebody else in the household. So they're weird, but there's a variety of reasons that it doesn't happen.
The question came up here. What if you forget to put it in the secrecy folder?
You know, the secrecy sleeve is not necessary at all. Okay, it makes it a little easier for us when we receive it, but that ballot is going to be counted if it's in that envelope. The secrecy sleeve we put in there. Remember, I told you that only one person slices the envelope, and then it goes to two other people who separate, take out the ballot and the secrecy sleeve. The envelope goes one way, then they take it out. It's really, again, to protect the secrecy of that ballot when it comes out of that envelope. Okay, we don't have any issue with it, and believe me, staff back there, after they've looked at 30,000. They do not want to look at your ballot. Okay, they really don't care. They just want to get the counting done. So it's not necessarily, and if they forget the secrecy sleeve, no big deal.
Okay, back to Eric. Ivan is wondering exactly how does it work if someone has become a Florida full-time resident, they've registered to vote, but they show up on their prior resident state. How do you go about revolving that? Or
when we
resolving
put
that?
them on, when we register them and they're saying they're now a resident of Florida and they're signing up as a resident, as soon as we notify New York, they take them off. Eric handles that and removes them and puts them down at their latest address.
Okay. Anybody? Alice, do you want to add anything before we end?
I have electricity now.
There you go.
It was early, huh?
So,
If I could ask Mr. Bennett to a little bit more about the rejected ballots. Are you saying that out of 30,000 mail-in ballots, you rejected 700? That seems like 2%.
No, we actually got back a little over 50,956, and they rejected a grand total of 701.
And how many of the 700 were remedied?
Well, actually, there were like 1,500 that were kicked out at the time. 781 of those were remedied, and 701 were not.
Okay.
That seems to be a problem in my mind, that we're rejecting a fairly large number, and that we're not remedying them very quickly.
Well, we sent out literally hundreds of opportunities for people to correct them. Okay, we got back 345 of those people that did take the effort to correct them of the hundreds that we sent out. You know, it's always a tough deal. You'd have to see the process to realize, Mr. Perry, how much effort we put into to try to count those ballots. Okay, but when people don't sign the envelope, okay, and then don't send in the affidavit, there's nothing we can do. You try to get a hold of them, but you know, again, you got a couple of hundred that just literally didn't sign the envelope. We have people who, for one reason or another, don't like the idea of having their signature on the outside of an envelope. They have a variety of reasons for not. We have some people who will sign the envelope and then put the envelope in another envelope to send it back because they don't want it on the outside. They're worried about it being on the outside. But we really do. We make a strong effort. Those that we have phone numbers for, we try to contact when we can. But as it's jamming down at the end, we literally don't have the staff to call everybody.
wait, on the,
Excuse me, is it possible that perhaps your instructions could be better written?
I don't know what you would want to do other than having read and 2 notes on there. Please remember to sign your ballot. I don't know what else would improve, but I'll be more than happy to take any suggestion that you or anybody else has got that might make it clearer. But other than putting on the front of the envelope and on the back of the envelope, please remember to sign your ballot.
All right, Chris, I think we need to go on to another issue. I see some other people have questions. Lynette, Terry, okay. You're unmuted. I can't hear.
Thanks, Mike. I really appreciate you being here today. And I assume you must know Craig Latimer, now the new president.
Never heard of him.
He was quite
impressive. I'm nicer and better looking than Craig Latimer.
I'm just so impressed by the work that the supervisors are doing. It's very reassuring, and I just want to thumb my nose at all those people that say stop the post office and all that stuff. So
I appreciate
thank you very
that.
much.
No, Craig Latimer does a fantastic job. You know, we're really lucky in our area between me and Ron Turner and Craig. We just got this wonderful, wonderful relationship. We keep each other informed of what we're doing, what works, how can we do it better. And we're good enough friends where we don't mind criticizing each other. And we take it as a constructive criticism. And that really works real well when you can say, hey, geez, I noticed your numbers were bad over here. Have you looked at this? That's true friendship. But you can actually criticize and make constructive